Now it is indeed my pleasure to welcome to the stage a fellow Arizonan, a retired police officer and paramedic or fireman or both, I think. And I've known Mark Finchem for a long time. He was a state rep for Arizona when we first met. I went to a lot of meetings that were called by the state to reinforce state sovereignty. They happened to like my Supreme Court case. A lot of them did. Mark was one of them. And oh, by the way, folks, in case you don't know, the only reason I'm standing here in front of you today or tonight is because when I was sheriff in Arizona, I sued the federal government and I beat the Clinton administration at the U.S. Supreme Court. The real miracle there is I lived to tell about it. So, but you never know, the day's not over yet. Mark Finchem is a true statesman. He is very dedicated to the Constitution or he wouldn't be here tonight. And he has an amazing history. He was defeated by a lawyer for the cartels, and I'm not joking. As Secretary of State, which is basically the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Arizona, he was ahead by 6 to 8% all the way throughout the election, and then the day thereof, he lost by 1.5%. And he is the epitome of voter fraud. He never committed it, but it was committed against him and a lot of other Arizonans. Every single election in that state that year went to a Democrat. All state offices went to a Democrat except for the school superintendent office. All the others went Democrat, all of them. And so Mark is being dedicated. Right now, he's very much involved nationwide with fighting election fraud. He knows more about it probably than anybody in the country. That's why he's here tonight. Besides being a friend of the Constitution, a friend of mine, he is a valiant fighter for liberty and for true and honest elections, true and fair elections. I give to you, my friend and yours, Mark Finchem.
Well, thank you very much. Apparently, Sheriff Mack forgot the rule, never trust a politician with a microphone, or at least for long. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to address you. There's a couple things that I don't like to correct Sheriff Mack because he's seldom wrong, but I'm just going to kind of reset the discussion a little bit. Yes, Adrian Fontes was the cartel lawyer for Fast and Furious, representing the interests of the Sinaloa cartel against Eric Holder. Yeah, so there couldn't possibly be any bad outcome from that. He is now number 2 in line for the governor of the state of Arizona, while Katie Hobbs, who we all believe is the fraudulent occupant of the 9th floor, will probably be removed from office for a pay-to-play scheme. And we believe that that was the plan all along. The true measure, though, that I need to correct Sheriff Mack on is that Kimberly Yee, the state treasurer, a Republican, won by 350,000 votes. Help me understand how you have a delta between Kari Lake at 10,500, perhaps one of the most popular personalities in the state of Arizona, and a very quiet, somewhat diminutive state treasurer at 390,000. By the way, CNN and I think it was Trafalgar, the polling outfits, had Kerry and I winning by 390,000 votes going into Election Day. So it's very clear that if anybody followed the Arizona election, and I'm not going to relitigate that tonight, but it's very clear that if you were paying attention to Arizona's steaming garbage heap of an election in Maricopa County, the machines that malfunctioned at the outset that rejected 7,000 ballots every 30 minutes in Republican districts, amazingly, they didn't do that in Democrat districts. And this is a county board of supervisors run by 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Some people would say the fix was in. Well, Kerry Lake and I went to the U.S. Supreme Court in a case of Lake and Finchem v. Fontes that ultimately the Supreme Court denied, but we wanted to tell the court, y'all been lied to, and we have the evidence. How many of you know what the EAC is, the Election Assistance Commission? Please raise your hands. If you don't, you need to. Because if you are the constitutional sheriff of your county, that organization certifies the election tabulation equipment in your county. And if you have an election that isn't hand counted, they affect that. We caught Maricopa County altering the software in the back end, not only for 2022, but for 2020. It was the exact same machine behavior setting, MBS error, for both elections. What does that mean? I never get tired of saying this. Donald Trump won. But the government gangsters, the very same people who want to limit your power and authority, the government gangsters altered the game mid-game. So, enough of my introduction, now I'll get to the message. We have a security problem. I think all of you will probably agree, and there's 3 security barriers that we have to look at. One is the border. Every state is a border state now. Because while we may have a physical border between Arizona and Mexico, the Biden administration has overcome that with Trader Mayorkas using airlines to fly people over the border, directly into the interior of the country. Some of them fly through Mesa Gateway Airport. Any media people in the room? Dang it. That's too bad, because I'd like to know, why aren't they covering the child sex trafficking that's going on through Mesa Gateway Airport? Why? Yeah, there's a certain amount of righteous indignation I have there, because we tried to stop that under the previous governor, and he would hear none of it. That would be a Republican previous governor. So not only do we have a border security problem, we also have a cyber security problem. In fact, recently it was reported by Gateway Pundit that Dominion uses none other than Huawei for their cloud services, owned and operated by the Chinese Communist Party. What could possibly go wrong there? Okay, so then we have the 3rd security problem, and that is election security. When you have election tabulation equipment that has been deployed across the land, I don't really care what the maker is, we've caught Dominion doing it. The Windows login, by the way, it still is password admin123. On the back side of that is a folder titled Passwords. Yeah. And in that folder is what are called the God keys. That is where a user can go in the back end, open the software, pull out a data file, insert a data file, and exit without ever being caught. So as long as those machines are in use, you do not have secure elections. Hard stop. As sheriffs of the counties that you represent, I would urge you to ask the election officials, Can you verify the certification of your vote tabulation equipment? Can you verify that it has not been penetrated by a surreptitious user? Can you verify that the machine behavior settings, MBS settings, do not have any errors before you begin running ballots through them? And best of all, what is your backup plan for the inevitable failure? Ladies and gentlemen, we already know that if Donald Trump gets into office, he is going to be like a scythe to tall grass to the government gangsters. They know what's coming. They've been on the road to perdition for a long time. And we now know where to look, what to look for, and how far to go back. I would also urge you, sheriffs, to let people know in your counties that if they go to the polls and if they are denied the opportunity to vote because they're told, oh, well, somebody else already voted for you under your name, they need to immediately file an identity theft complaint with you, because that preserves their 14th Amendment right to challenge the election. Bet you didn't hear about that before, did you? Now, Sheriff Mack did something absolutely remarkable. In fact, I know he kind of gushes once in a while, but Mack Prince v. U.S., I cited that in my master's thesis not once but twice. The challenge by a lesser magistrate. You know the doctrine of the lesser magistrate? How many people have heard of that? Okay, as another one. If you haven't got the book, get it. It essentially, besides the Constitution and the pamphlet that Sheriff Mack has put out on his case, Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate is probably one of the most important books that you can get and read. It lays out the argument that Sheriff Mack used. So think about this. A sheriff out of a little bitty county in Arizona that actually has more cows than people? Not kidding you. It has more cows than people. Was able to challenge the federal government and stop the forced implementation of the Brady Law through the coercion and co-opting of the local sheriff's offices, not just in Graham County, but all 3,143 counties or county equivalents across the United States. That is the power of the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. Now we talk a little bit about the Constitution. In fact, I'm wearing a shirt here in protest. I don't know if many of you have seen this, but I'm going to stand out just for just a second so you can see it. Okay, what it says is, I think you've had just a little too much to think. Yeah, that would be the thought police. Well, the thought police now are under the banner of the Washington Post and the New York Times. In fact, the New York Times, I don't know, how many of you saw the New York Times article here recently that says, the Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous? Have you seen that one? Yeah, I'll get that to Sheriff Mack so you can read it. It's quite hysterical, actually, written by an extreme leftist. One of the biggest threats to America's politics, hear me when I say this, not to America, but to America's politics. This is how the writer, I'm not going to call her a journalist because that's an insult to real journalists. One of the biggest threats of to America's politics might be the country's founding document. New York Times, what's the date of this dribble? August 31, 2024. That sounds like Nazi Germany, 1938. The thought police are very much at work, ladies and gentlemen, and they are trying to, this is what's called shaping. If you don't know what fifth generation warfare is, go to generalflynn.com, order the book, 5GW. This is what's called shaping. How many of you have heard of Cass Sunstein? Anybody? Oh, good. All right, we got some hands going up. Cass Sunstein basically is he's another one of the traitors under the Obama administration, but he developed this idea called nudge. You nudge people into position, you nudge them, you nudge them, you nudge them, and then you shove them. You get them close enough to the edge, and what we're talking about now is the Overton window. The Overton window is that space between public policy and public awareness. And as you move public awareness more and more to the left, nudging it along the way, you get to a place where you can shove people over the edge. Let's revisit 1938 Germany. They burn the Reichstag, and they blame it on who? The communists. Then they begin to round up who? The mentally retarded, the physically defective, the gypsies. Then they began to round up the Jews, and then the Christians. The whole time they were nudging the German people into a shove into full compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly where we are at today. I am so proud of the sheriffs in this room who told their states, I'll not enforce a mask mandate, I'll not enforce a lockdown. Sheriff Mark Lamb, would you stand up for a minute? Until recently, Mark Lamb was my sheriff. Sorry, man, I had to move north. So my time with you draws short. I'll be around for the next, I'll be around here until Sunday morning when we check out. And I'd love to talk to as many of you as I can. But I'm standing up to demand that the FBI be defunded and that money be sent to sheriff's offices. Now, that's not to say that the FBI doesn't have a role. They do. It's a data management role. Actually, I go even further and say it's a data housing role, data security role. So I don't mind the idea of having a central organization to run NCIC, to manage interstate communication for wants and warrants. There's a role for them. I'm a little concerned about them managing the DNA database. I'm getting the hook here, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, you can go 15 more. Well, that's all right. Like I said, never trust a politician with a microphone, and then they even give me more time. But I want to talk to you. No, it's all right, man. Gosh, I broke my train of thought. I know I was just an engine in a caboose, but the FBI, okay? So the FBI does have a role. It's the Federal Bureau of Information, not investigation. Those guys couldn't find their rump with both hands in most cases. And then when they do, they better make sure that it's their own, not somebody else's. When we take a look at the absolute failures of dignitary protection, and I've been part of some of those teams, when you're protected is allowed to go on stage with an open question about site security, every one of those individuals needs fired. Every single one. Now, there's a silver lining to this. And I think even President Trump would probably recognize this. In fact, I know for a fact that he already has. What happened in Butler County, Pennsylvania, many would say is a fulfillment of God's word. When he grabbed his ear and was bleeding and that blood dripped onto his heel, That was a message. What man could not do, God can. I don't know how many of you have watched or been with President Trump during his messages, but he has this, I wouldn't call it a tick, but he does this thing where he turns, arguably to look at the teleprompter, and then every once in a while he'll go, in that millisecond, when he did that, the shot was off. Now, some would say, well, that's why it happened. No, I'd like to think that it was the touch of God, just enough on that missile that all it did was poke a hole in his ear. But what followed was amazing to me. Yeah, the FBI director, yeah, I'm going to pick on him again. Well, it could have been shrapnel. It could have been glass. It could have been fill in the blank. The fact of the matter is the 45th president of the United States was shot by an assassin's bullet. Let's not obfuscate that. Let's examine what the failures were. The failures of the dignitary protection team, the failures of the local police department, every single individual in that detail has what's called a kill switch, arguably not the target. It's to stop the event if they observe something that is a threat. Every individual has that authority, yet it failed. That needs to have a significant failure analysis. But the FBI director, who I believe now should be called upon to resign, he won't because he's part of the team. I would like to see a refashioning of the FBI to the Federal Bureau of Information, and I think President Trump is probably on board with that idea, to manage things like APHIS, the DNA database, the cold case matching database, which I think has not yet really been put together fully. But the vast resources that are expended on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, when they create evidence and execute an invalid search warrant on Mar-a-Lago with evidence that was created by GSA and the National Archives and sent unsolicited to that address, that's what's commonly called a drop, a setup. I don't know what it is in your community, but it's like when you have a dirty cop who drops a gun, and it happens. There's a lot of dirty guys out there. And unfortunately, we appear to have an infestation of traitors within the federal apparatus that would allow something like that to happen. So that means the FBI needs to be done away with, and we retask those dollars to local sheriffs. Why? Because the local sheriff represents the one office that is elected to protect the civil rights of the people. Appointed police officers, you can tell, protect their boss. That would be the mayor. Mayor of Miami, mayor of St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, St. Paul. They're not there for the people, they're there for a paycheck. And I'm not impugning law enforcement officers at the chief level. I'm simply pointing out that they're responsible to their boss, as is true with any employment relationship. So who's the boss of the sheriff? The people. And that is the reason that I celebrate CSPOA. In fact, I'm one of the first people that joined the organization way back when my hair was a little more brown than it is now. But I celebrate CSPOA for the mission that it is on, and the fact that every one of you is here because you have an interest in protecting the civil rights of the people. I'd like to go back for a moment and revisit the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. Matt did a great job in this book. One of my favorite paragraphs in it is in I believe, chapter 12, second paragraph, when Plato is walking the streets of Syracuse and Dionysus is surrounded by his phalanx of guards. Plato asks him, what have you done to the people to require so much protection? Think about that statement for a minute. Walls don't work on the border, but they sure as hell work around Washington, D.C. They erect walls around the White House. They erect walls around Congress. That ought to give everybody a little pause to wonder, what exactly are they doing with those walls? I would hope that they're erecting those walls to keep the crooks in, as opposed to keeping the people out. But ladies and gentlemen, we truly are engaged in a war. Now, I've been criticized by the media multiple times about using that kind of phraseology. But we're now engaged in fifth generation warfare, and that is a PSYOP war. You are trying to be convinced, they are trying to convince you that everything's okay. You remember the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves? How many remember that? Okay, good, we got a good number. Remember the moment that he pushed on it and it bounced back, the image? That's what we're looking at today. We've been fed BS for so long in the media that they really believe their own stuff, and they expect that we're going to believe it without questioning. Now, I don't know if you subscribe to it, you might want to, but there's an outfit called yournews.com. It is an emerging platform for citizen journalists to get real-time news out to the people and bypass both the three-letter broadcast media organizations and the print media organizations like New York Times, WAPO, those guys. They wouldn't know the truth if it ran over them like a bus. Although we did have one moment of clarity. Young lady by the name of Molly Ball, writing for Time magazine. The secret, think about the title of this thing, okay? I believe it was The Secret Plan to Save Democracy. Yeah. So you had big tech, big labor, big government. I guess there's two other bigs, big politics and something. All of them came together to protect democracy from Donald Trump. Well, there's an analysis out there that between the Bushes, the Obamas, the Clintons, and President Pudding Pants, they've controlled government for like 26 years. But Donald Trump was the 3.5-year wrecking ball. They would have you believe that even though they created the problem, they have the fix. You just have to preserve their power base. The reason that narrative is out there is because they know what will happen if a law-abiding president re-enters the Oval Office. Yes, I support Donald Trump, and yes, he endorsed me. It's not a quid pro quo. But I look at my president with wonder and amazement that he has handled himself, that he has conducted himself in the manner that he has. And I think in that, it frustrates people like the crooked justice. I say that with the urge to vomit in New York, who not only did not oversee a conviction of a crime, he can't even say what the crime was. This is a political hatchet job that quite frankly reminds me of the movie Napoleon. In the earliest moments where they march out Marie Antoinette to a guillotine based on what? Unbridled hate that was created by what? The people who wanted to take power away from the people who were in power. We are engaged in what is quite frankly, a modern day power struggle. And I will tell you, sheriffs, you're in the way. and God bless you for being there. Thank you very much.